When it was first announced that Brad Pitt would be sitting down for a 101 interview with Piers Morgan, the entertainment world held its collective breath. Brad, the famously elusive Hollywood icon, had long been careful with interviews, choosing them sparingly and speaking with precision. Piers, on the other hand, thrived on confrontation. His interviews weren't so much conversations as verbal battlegrounds, and his reputation for prodding sensitive subjects was known to make even seasoned media veterans uncomfortable. Brad's appearance on Piers Morgan Uncensored was being hailed as his most daring media moment in years, a sit-down many hoped would provide rare insight into the man behind the myth. But what no one expected was that the interview would implode so spectacularly that security would be called, and the world would watch as one of the biggest stars on earth was kicked off live television by a host whose ego could rival Hollywood's brightest spotlight. What started as a headline-seeking event turned into a cultural flashpoint, one that left audiences stunned and divided. Asterisk, the stage was sleek, the lighting sharp, and the anticipation thick as Brad Pitt entered the set. Dressed casually, but confidently. In a slate-gray jacket and dark jeans, he carried himself with the kind of unspoken charisma that can't be taught. His demeanor was calm, his eyes alert. Across from him, Piers Morgan wore a smirk that had launched countless Twitter storms. He welcomed Brad with a handshake, and for the first 10 minutes, the tone was disarmingly light. They spoke about Brad's new film, his recent dive into sculpture, and even his much-discussed decision to scale back acting roles. But it was clear to anyone watching that this calm was merely the eye of the storm. Piers wasn't known for staying polite for long. As the host's body language tightened and the glint in his eye sharpened, viewers leaned closer to their screens. They knew what was coming. Sure enough, with the most casual venom, Piers leaned forward and said, "Let's talk about the elephant in the room, your personal life. You've become more famous for courtroom drama and divorce papers than movies. Does that bother you, or is it all part of the brand now?" Asterisk. Brad took a long pause, then smiled faintly. "It bothers me in the sense that I never signed up for my personal life to be entertainment. But I also understand that being in the public eye comes with certain expectations," Piers interjected. "Expectations? Or consequences? You're the one who paraded around with Angelina Jolie, adopted half the world, and then ended up in a custody battle aired out in the press like an episode of a soap opera." Brad's smile faded. "I didn't parade. I lived. And if loving my family publicly is something you consider theatrical, maybe that says more about your view of fatherhood than mine." The studio audience gasped audibly. Piers, unflinching, pushed further. "But do you take any responsibility for the chaos? The leaked documents, the substance abuse allegations? Or are you still in the Hollywood martyr phase of your career?" Brad leaned in slightly. "I've taken more responsibility in private than most people will ever know. But I refuse to put my wounds on display just to satisfy your appetite for spectacle." The line hit like a slap. And even Piers had to blink. Asterisk. It was clear now that this wasn't going to be a safe or sanitized conversation. Piers doubled down, bringing up Brad's ex-wife, Jennifer Aniston, and the resurgence of public nostalgia over their relationship. "You're aware, of course, that the internet still roots for you too. Some people think you ruined America's sweetheart for a Hollywood temptress. Do you regret how things ended with Jen?" Brad took a deep breath. "What I regret is the public being fed a narrative that reduced complex human relationships. 2 magazine covers and gossip columns. Jennifer and I had our story, and it's no one else's to judge." Piers smirked. "But don't you think you owe her something? An apology? Closure?" Brad's voice dropped to a measured calm. "What I owe her is what I've already said privately, not something. I'll perform for a camera so you can get a viral clip." The room went cold. Piers snapped, "Isn't that convenient? A man with a global platform choosing privacy when it suits him." Brad shook his head slowly. "Privacy isn't convenience. It's survival." The tension had reached a point where no one could pretend this was just an interview anymore. Asterisk then. In true Piers Morgan fashion, the subject shifted without warning. From relationships to political commentary, you've been vocal about certain issues, immigration, climate change, mental health. But you've also been accused of being another out-of-touch celebrity, preaching to the masses from a Malibu mansion. What gives you the right to speak on any of it? Brad's posture changed, sat forward slightly, eyes narrowing. I don't speak from a mansion. I speak from experience. I've seen addiction. I've seen despair. And I've spent the last decade trying to fix what fame broke in me. If that makes me unqualified, then maybe your standards for credibility are more about class than clarity. Piers raised an eyebrow. So now you're the everyman, Brad answered. No, I'm a man who's trying. And that used to count for something before outrage became a career choice. The jab was unmistakable. Piers leaned back in his chair, smirking like a fox just before it bites. The game had changed. This was no longer a conversation, it was a fight, and both men had decided they weren't leaving the ring unbruised. Asterisk, as if on cue. Piers launched into the topic of masculinity, a subject Brad had touched on in past interviews. You've spoken about redefining masculinity, Piers said, but critics say you've become soft, that you've gone from Fight Club to Feelings Club. What do you say to that? Brad didn't hesitate. Real strength isn't stoicism. It's being willing to unravel in front of people and still show up again. If that's soft, then maybe softness is exactly what this world needs more of. Piers laughed. So now we should all cry our problems away? Brad shot back. No, but we should stop pretending that silence is strength. That armor doesn't make you invincibly, it makes you hollow. For a moment, Piers didn't have a comeback, and he leaned in, narrowing his gaze. Tell me, Brad, how many therapists does it take to keep you upright these days? The studio audience gasped, and Brad's expression went from tired to furious in half a second. That line of questioning isn't just ignorant, it's dangerous. You don't mock someone for working on their mental health, unless, of course, ratings matter more to you than responsibility. Asterisk, the insult clearly rattled Brad, but what shook the audience was how calmly he handled it. His voice didn't rise, but his message was scorching. I came here in good faith. I thought maybe we'd have a meaningful conversation. But clearly, I mistook provocation for journalism. Piers chuckled. This is uncensored, Brad. What did you expect, a safe space? Brad answered, No, I expected a conversation where ego didn't bulldoze empathy. I was wrong. And then, without waiting for Piers to cue the next question, Brad removed his mic, stood up slowly, and looked directly into the camera. To anyone watching, take care of your mind. You don't owe anyone your pain as performance. Piers tried to cut in. Oh, come on, you're walking out. But Brad was already moving. He stopped once, just before exiting the set, and turned toward Piers with one final look. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from someone who's made a career out of tearing people down. And with that, he left the studio in silence. Asterisk, the aftermath was instant. Clips of Brad walking off mid-show went viral within minutes. Hashtags like hashtag Brad walks out, hashtag Piers vs Pitt, and hashtag mental health matters surged to the top of every trending list. Celebrities began posting messages of support. Fans expressed outrage. Critics applauded the boldness. But one thing was universally agreed. Upon this, wasn't just an interview gone wrong. It was a cultural moment, a defining example of how media platforms have evolved from spaces of inquiry into gladiator arenas for emotional combat. Piers, as expected, tried to spin the narrative in his favor. He ended the show with a monologue mocking Brad's meltdown, claiming he had struck a nerve with Hollywood's most sensitive star. But the internet wasn't buying it. The comments flooded in, challenging Piers' tactics and defending Brad's dignity. Some even called for Piers' removal, saying his behavior crossed a line from tough journalism into targeted harassment. The moment had gone far beyond two men arguing. It had become a mirror held up to the way we treat public figures in pain. Asterisk, Brad Pitt, for his part, released no formal statement in the hours after the incident. His team remained silent, allowing the footage to speak for itself. But sources close to the actor revealed he had felt ambushed by the tone of the interview. He thought it would be difficult. Yes, one insider shared. But he didn't expect cruelty disguised as curiosity. Mental health advocates seized the opportunity to highlight how even powerful men like Brad Pitt are vulnerable when subjected to public shaming disguised as journalism. Opinion pieces began pouring in, discussing the ethics of interviews and the fine line between tough questioning and exploitation. The incident reignited conversations about emotional intelligence, vulnerability, and the societal expectation that men must either absorb criticism silently or be labeled fragile. Brad hadn't just walked off a set, he had walked into the hearts of millions who saw in his silence a kind of dignity rarely permitted to public men.